With the first year of the Trump presidency over with, I thought it's worth taking an in-depth look to try to answer some basic questions, like what evidence can we look to evaluate the truthfulness of Trump's claims? What type of false claims has he made, and how does he compare to other presidents? What are his sources of information, and importantly, how are journalists covering his administration? There's a lot to talk about here, so strap in. This is going to be a long one. Okay, first, bear with me while I cover some basic terminology. An opinion is a belief or value judgment, not necessarily based on facts, knowledge, or evidence. Opinions are based on an individual's experience or value system. Importantly, opinions don't need evidence. Everyone has them, that's fine. A claim is different. A claim is an assertion or attempt at identifying truth. Most importantly, to make a claim, you need to have evidence. Not just evidence, but enough evidence to convince people, typically people with expertise of some kind, that your claim has merit. A claim can be tested, challenged, supported, proven, undermined, etc. But the point is, unlike an opinion, a claim needs evidence. There are many types of claims: true claims, false claims, simple claims, complex claims, untested claims, vague claims. The point is, claims are judged on the quality of their evidence. One special type of claim is a conspiracy theory, which is a false or unproven claim or series of claims based around illegal or harmful acts carried out by governments, corporations, or other powerful actors. Conspiracy theories often sound implausible, ridiculous, or totally unlikely to be true. When someone labels a claim a conspiracy theory, the term implicitly carries a kind of value judgment, suggesting that the claim of conspiracy is highly implausible, false, or even laughable or absurd. Be careful with this one, because there have been, of course, some real proven conspiracies. US history is full of infamous conspiracies, from Watergate to the Iran-Contra scandal. With these terms in mind, let's turn to President Trump. Let's start with the obvious. Evidence suggests that Trump makes a lot of false claims, way more than other presidents. There's no perfect way to compare, but let's take a look at a few different sets of evidence to help us get a clear sense of Trump's truthfulness. The Washington Post, one of the most prominent news organizations in the US, keeps a running tally of Trump's false claims. In the first year of his presidency, they found that President Trump has made 2,140 false or misleading claims. You can check out their database for updated numbers. Okay, yikes, that sounds like a lot. In the past, news organizations haven't tracked every false statement made by a politician, but the Post and other news organizations have started doing so with President Trump because, honestly, he just makes a lot of false claims. Let's take a look at another piece of evidence. The New York Times published a comparison of the false claims made by President Trump and former President Obama. They found that in his first 10 months as president, Trump had made about 103 unique, completely false claims, while Obama had only made 18 in his entire 8 years as president. You can probably see one of the problems already. The Post is tracking all statements that are false or misleading, even if repeated, even if minor or only just misleading or partially true, while the Times is tracking major individual claims that are demonstrably false. Two different ways of trying to quantify false information. It's safe to say that President Trump has a radically different style of communication than previous presidents. President Obama, for example, didn't really use Twitter. His staff tweeted out official statements, but Obama didn't personally use the platform to communicate. President Trump's use of Twitter is infamous. He tweets constantly, often multiple times a day. His statements are typically not filtered through a professional staff who would check his claims for truthfulness. Trump also uses Twitter to constantly attack people. The New York Times keeps a tracker of this too, documenting the hundreds of people, places, and things Donald Trump has insulted on Twitter. You can actually click on any of the links and it will take you directly to the actual tweet. These thousands of insults and attacks tweeted about hundreds of different people are not even counted in part of the true or false databases, since they're generally opinions and not claims. The Times and the Post have attempted to judge Trump's claims using this kind of data journalism, which is helpful, except there's no standard when it comes to how to track and evaluate statements. For example, Should we count the same false statement repeated multiple times like the Post has done? Or should we focus on singular statements like the Times? Or should we look at a presidential ratio of true to false statements? We can also look at the work of PolitiFact, a political fact-checking organization with a good deal of credibility. They won a Pulitzer Prize for their work and have a running partnership with over a dozen newspapers around the country. Since 2009, PolitiFact has compiled these kind of scorecards for dozens of major politicians, ranking the truthfulness of their claims. Let's start with President Obama. Most of his major public claims were rated as true or mostly true, and about a quarter were rated as false or worse. That sounds pretty typical for a politician. His 2012 opponent, Mitt Romney, scored a bit worse, but still the majority of his public claims were at least half true or true. Hillary Clinton was similar to Obama, but about a quarter of her statements were false or worse. Most were true. You can look at Politico's full list of politicians, Republicans and Democrats, and find roughly similar scores. Donald Trump, however, stands out in strong contrast. About 70% of his major public statements rated by Politico were classified as false or worse, and only a minority of his statements were mostly true or better. Most concerningly, Trump has 74 pants on fire rated statements, and this is just after 1 year of being president. Politico's pants on fire rating is reserved for the most extreme, intentionally false lies that a politician can make. Former President Obama, for example, had only 9 pants on fire ratings for the entire 8 years of his presidency. If Trump keeps up this rate, he could end up with hundreds of pants on fire ratings by the end of his presidency. All this data from the Times, the Post, PolitiFact, taken together, it does show that Trump appears to be less truthful than a normal president. But it doesn't really tell us much about what kinds of false statements he's been making, and most importantly, if they're lies, that is, with intention to deceive, or merely misstatements or claims that just lack solid evidence, which can happen honestly.
Reckless, not honest. These are some of the words being used to describe President Donald Trump in the past few days.
The same poll also found that 71% don't think the president is level-headed, and 62% don't think he's honest.
All right, David, stay right there. We're going to have more on all those tweets shortly. Before bringing the rest of the panel, I just want to quickly underscore that trust number that David showed that we talked about. Just 24% saying they trust all or most of what they hear in official communications from the White House. One reason for how low it is could be that this president, just 200 days in office, has said so many things that simply are not true, including some that practically disintegrate the moment he hits send on the Twitter machine.
Quite frankly, these findings may not be that shocking. Poll after poll of Americans find that only a minority of people describe Trump as honest, while a majority describe Trump as dishonest. Most people, even many of his supporters, know that Trump is a non-traditional president, that he's way outside the bounds of normalcy. But what does that mean in practice? Donald Trump kicked off his presidency by lying to the American public about one of the most insignificant and easily provable of facts, the size of his inauguration crowd, a message that he had his newly installed press secretary, Sean Spicer, delivered during his first ever White House press briefing.
Photographs of the inaugural proceedings were intentionally framed in a way, in one particular tweet, to minimize the enormous support that had gathered on the National Mall. This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe.
Every new administration tries to set a new tone with their first press briefing, indicating how they're going to deal with the press. Spicer's statement rightfully horrified the press. For journalists, it was not a good sign of things to come. Trump lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton by about 2.8 million votes, so it seems that he was looking for ways to try to frame his election as a major victory rather than a close and divisive election that was decided in the Electoral College. The idea that Trump would have a bigger crowd than President Obama doesn't really make any sense. Obama's 2008 election was a historic election in American history, the first non-white president to ever be elected, and to boot, Washington, D.C. has a really large African-American population that came out in droves to celebrate this historic achievement. Trump, on the other hand, won a much more narrow election with a lower turnout, receiving about 6.5 million fewer votes than Obama did in 2008. His supporters are also largely spread throughout rural America, pretty far from D.C., so it would have been difficult for many of them to travel to D.C. For his inauguration. Journalists were rightly alarmed with how brazen the new administration was lying about such an easily debunked claim, and they spent the first few days of the new presidency sparring with Trump administration officials who were sent out to defend the president at all costs.
Then explain. You did not answer the question. Why did the president send out his press secretary, who's not just the spokesperson for Donald Trump, he also serves as the spokesperson for all of America at times. He speaks for all of the country at times. Why put him out there for the very first time in front of that podium to utter a provable falsehood? It's a small thing, but the first time he confronts the public, it's a falsehood?
Chuck, I mean, if we're going to keep referring to our press secretary in those types of terms, I think that we're going to have to rethink our relationship here.
Not excuse, and you did not answer the question.
I did answer your question.
No, you did not. You did
Yes,
not
I
answer
did.
the question of why the president asked the White House press secretary to come out in front of the podium for the first time and utter a falsehood. Why did he do that? It undermines the credibility of the entire White House press office
No, it
on day
doesn't.
one.
Don't be so overly dramatic about it, Chuck. You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative
that there's-
facts? Alternative facts, 4 of the 5 facts he uttered. The
Hey,
one
Chuck,
thing he
why-
got
hey,
right
Chuck.
was Zeke Miller. 4 of the 5 facts he uttered were just not true. Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
In a moment of accidental clarity, Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway vividly admitted the administration's game plan to aggressively disregard truth in an effort to defend the president no matter what. Maybe by accident, she invented a new term that has come to define the Trump administration's habit of spreading provably false information, Conway's alternative facts. The daily misinformation campaign that Kellyanne Conway, Sean Spicer, and the rest of the Trump team had to carry out, constantly defending the false statements and evidence-free claims of the president, would take a toll. Sean Spicer resigned after just 6 months as press secretary, but not before being memorably lampooned on SNL for his confrontational style with journalists. Embarking on a kind of media tour to repair his image after working in the Trump White House, Spicer has repeatedly expressed regret over peddling misinformation in his role as press secretary. Okay, we know that Trump makes an unprecedented number of false claims, and that's obviously very concerning. But he also spreads conspiracy theories to a degree that has really no historical comparison in modern US presidential history. Let's start with an example. Trump, as a candidate, and now as president, routinely calls climate change a hoax. Since the early 2000s, the world scientists have developed a consensus that human-caused climate change is a real and profound threat. In fact, about 97% of climate scientists around the world agree. This consensus emerged after decades of research and debate within the scientific community. There are people, not really scientists, who cast doubt on the science behind climate change or who claim there's not enough evidence. But to suggest that it's all a hoax, which implies a kind of malicious intent to deceive, that's way beyond a false claim. It's actually an allegation of conspiracy. Trump isn't just stating his belief that climate change isn't happening, but rather he's claiming that scientists are deliberately lying to the public. Quite literally, he's alleging that thousands of scientists at hundreds of universities in the US and around the world have actually just been making it all up, while conspiring together to lie to the world. Here's a real tweet from Donald Trump in 2012. Right around the time when he started talking about running for president. You can go to his Twitter account and still find it. This is so absurd that it's worth really stopping for a minute to kind of take this in, that Trump is spreading a bona fide conspiracy theory here. What makes it a conspiracy theory is the suggestion that not only is climate change a hoax that is intentionally made up to push an agenda, but that China created the hoax to hurt US manufacturing. This suggestion that a powerful entity is trying to damage the American economy. Let's take this seriously just for a second. For this to be true, China would have had to launch a massive global campaign to infiltrate and control PhD programs and institutes of scientific research going back at least 50 or 60 years. And they would still have to control thousands of scientists at every major university around the world, keeping them silent and hiding this massive conspiracy. Many of my colleagues from the University of New Hampshire do actual climate change research. Are they secretly Chinese agents? See how absurd that sounds? This tweet and his frequent claims that climate change is a hoax suggest that Trump lacks even a basic sense of what science is, what universities do, or what a country like China is capable of doing. It also raises extremely worrisome questions about where Trump would even get information like that. No credible news organization would ever run a story with such a wild conspiracy theory. This tweet actually came up in the first debate between Trump and Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton did not think a whole lot of Donald Trump's views on climate change.
Donald thinks that climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. I think it's real.
I did not.
Science is real.
I do not say that.
And I think it's
important
important that we grip this and deal with it, both at home and abroad.
She says he did. He says, I don't. This is the problem with Twitter. It leaves a record. And yes, many times on Twitter, he's referred to climate change as a hoax. And specifically back in 2012, he said the concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive. There it is in black and white. And that makes what she said about this wolf true.
So here we face the kind of core conundrum of the Trump presidency. Trump says such absurd and dangerous things that journalists have to fact check it, and then he claims that they are fake news and unfair while denying he even made the claim to begin with. Here's a different but still pretty disturbing example. After his defeated Republican opponent, Senator Ted Cruz, refused to publicly endorse Trump at the Republican National Convention, Trump, still angry at Cruz, held a press conference where he claimed that Cruz's father might have helped kill President John F. Kennedy.
His father was with Lee Harvey Oswald prior to Oswald's being, shot. I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous. What is this right prior to his being shot? And nobody even brings it up. I mean, they don't even talk about that. That was reported, and nobody talks about it. But I think it's horrible.
Right. There was a picture out there that reportedly shows Rafael Cruz standing with Lee Harvey Oswald.
I mean, what was he doing with Lee Harvey Oswald shortly before the death, before the shooting? It's horrible.
I think no one talks about it because it's a made-up conspiracy theory.
And now, just moments ago, Ted Cruz, in a campaign stop in Evansville, Indiana, responded to Donald Trump's attacks of his father.
This morning, Donald Trump went on national television and attacked my father. Donald Trump alleges that my dad was involved in assassinating JFK. Now, let's be clear. This is nuts. This is not a reasonable position. This is just kooky. And while I'm at it, I guess I should go ahead and admit, yes, my dad killed JFK. He is secretly Elvis, and Jimmy Hoffa is buried in his backyard. You know, Donald's source for this is the National Enquirer. The National Enquirer is tabloid trash, but it's run by his good friend David Pecker, the CEO, who's endorsed Donald Trump. And so the National Enquirer has become his hit piece that he uses to smear anybody and everybody. I'm going to do something I haven't done for the entire campaign. For those of y'all who have traveled with me all across the country, I'm going to tell you what I really think of Donald Trump. This man is a pathological liar. He doesn't know the difference between truth and lies. He lies practically every word that comes out of his mouth. And in a pattern that I think is straight out of a psychology textbook. his response is to accuse everybody else of lying. He accuses everybody on that debate stage of lying. And it's simply a mindless yell. Whatever he does, he accuses everyone else of doing. The man cannot tell the truth, but he combines it with being a narcissist. A narcissist at a level I don't think this country's ever seen.
Trump claimed that his source for the story was the National Enquirer, a supermarket tabloid that even grocery shoppers know is full of sensational and made-up stories about celebrities. Trump didn't stop peddling conspiracy theories after he won the 2016 presidential election. On November 26th, just a few weeks after winning, Trump tweeted out an allegation of massive voter fraud without providing any evidence. As a candidate, Trump had frequently made bogus claims about voter fraud, a rigged election, which, that wasn't good. But this is different. For a president-elect to allege that millions of fraudulent votes had been cast is an incredibly serious allegation. If true, this would mean that our entire electoral system was compromised and would need to be overhauled. If true, this cast doubt on hundreds of local elections and really the fabric of our democracy itself. President Trump repeated this claim over and over again, further clarifying that 3 to 5 million illegal votes had been cast, again without providing any evidence. Like the bogus claims about his inauguration crowd size, President Trump seemed to be trying to find a reason to explain his loss of the popular vote, which he basically admitted in his tweet. In an interview, CNN brought up Trump's claim of massive voter fraud.
The president sat down with David Muir of ABC News earlier today for an extended interview, his first interview since the election, and they had a chance to speak about the president's allegations of voter fraud, massive voter fraud. Listen to this.
Registered who are dead, who are illegals, who are in 2 states. You have people registered in 2 states. They're registered in New York and in New Jersey. They vote twice. There are millions of votes, in my opinion. Now, I'm going to do an investigation.
You're now president of the United States. When you say
of course, and I want the voting process to be legitimate.
But what I'm asking, when you say, in your opinion, millions of illegal votes, that is something that is extremely fundamental to our functioning democracy, a fair and free election. You say you're going to launch an investigation into this.
Done.
What you have presented so far has been debunked. It's been called false.
Take a look at the Pew reports.
I called the author of the Pew report last night, and he told me that they found no evidence of voter fraud.
Then why did he write the report?
He said no evidence of voter fraud.
Then why did he write the report?
So
according to Pew report, then he's groveling again. I always talk about the reporters that grovel when they want to write something that you want to hear, but not necessarily millions of people want to hear or have to hear.
So you've launched an investigation.
We're going to launch an investigation to find out, and then the next time, and I will say this, of those votes cast, none of them come to me. None of them come to me. They would all be for the other side. None of them come to me. But when you look at the people that are registered, dead, illegal, and 2 states, and some cases maybe 3 states, we have a lot to look into.
David, you were part of that Pew Research study that the president was referring to, right?
Yes, I was. I directed that study when I was at Pew. He's right about some of it. The reasons we wrote the report is because we were studying the degree to which records were out of date, mainly because people move. And he's quite right about the fact that there are millions of records that reflect people who have since moved to a new address, and there are, we estimated back in 2012, almost 5 years ago, maybe as many as 1.8 million records of people who had died since they last voted. But there's a big leap between an out-of-date record, an administrative inefficiency on a list, and the act of voter fraud. It just doesn't happen. This is not something that hasn't been looked at. The Bush administration DOJ looked at this. The Federal Election Assistance Commission looked at this. Secretaries of State, both Republicans and Democrats, look at this regularly throughout the election cycle. The Secretary of State of Ohio, Republican John Husted, does it every 2 years. The Republican Secretary of State of Louisiana, Tom Shedler, does a great job of looking at this as well. And they've all come to the same conclusion, which is that the administrative inefficiencies that might exist on the voter rolls do not result in fraudulent ballots being cast. And in fact, in the 5 years since that report was issued, the voter lists have gotten much, much better thanks to the fine work of election officials all across the country to use data and technology to make sure that they can keep up with people's mobility.
Yes, there are millions of people who are registered in multiple states, and people who have died but are still registered, but that is not the same thing as voter fraud. Trump claimed that millions of people voted illegally, such as voting twice or voting under someone else's name, and there is just no evidence for it. Trump's voter fraud statement is a false claim and a conspiracy theory, since he's alleging some kind of organized attempt to steal the election by millions of fraudulent votes, none of which went to him, he claims, emphasizing the conspiracy nature of the allegation. Elections in the US are not run by the federal government. Our system is decentralized. That is, each state runs its own contest, which is designed to thwart any kind of systematic voter fraud. The simple fact is that voter fraud is extremely rare, which is logical if you think about it. First off, why would anyone commit voter fraud, which is a felony punishable by up to 1 year in prison? One person voting twice just isn't going to make that much of an impact on a presidential election.
President Trump is claiming, and the White House is reaffirming, the fiction that millions of illegal votes were cast in the 2016 election. It is empirically a stunning allegation for which the White House is providing no evidence. And there is a reason they are providing no evidence. There is no evidence. It is not true. Moments ago, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer acknowledged that the president believes 3 to 5 million votes were illegally cast in November. It was interesting what Mr. Spicer did not say. He did not say that he shared the belief, even after he was asked. Now, why would that be? Perhaps because there's zero evidence of widespread voter fraud in the 2016 election. Now, has there ever been voter fraud? Any instances? Yes. Massive voter fraud? 3 to 5 million votes cast illegally in 2016? No. It's simply not true. In fact, if there were even a fraction of the voter fraud that President Trump is alleging, he would be derelict not to order a major investigation. It would likely require a vast conspiracy involving public officials all over the country and would likely have had far-reaching impact in other contests, tainting races down the ballot, not just the presidential race. If President Trump's beliefs are true, Republican leaders in Congress should be holding hearings and trumpeting this injustice every single day. His Justice Department, his Department of Homeland Security, all of them would need to crack down immediately. Unless, of course, it's not even remotely true, which is, of course, the case.
Trump later specified that he believed illegals committed voter fraud, again, with no evidence. But that's even more ridiculous. Why would someone who lacks legal status vote at all? Immigrants who lack legal status in America generally avoid confrontation with the government because, they're basically risking arrest and possible deportation. Would you risk being deported just for a single vote? Most Republican leaders in Washington were afraid to publicly criticize Trump. They had just won control of Congress thanks to many of the same people that voted for him. Only veteran Republicans, like Senator John McCain, had the freedom to speak out against Trump's evidence-free claims of voter fraud. Here's McCain noting that there's just no evidence of illegal voting.
First, I'd like to get your reaction to President Trump reportedly repeating to congressional leaders last night his unfounded claim that 3 to 5 million illegally cast votes cost him the popular vote victory. Your colleague, Senator Lindsey Graham, told CNN today it's the most inappropriate thing for the president to say without proof. Do you agree with Senator Graham?
Well, I obviously have seen no evidence of illegal voting, but my focus has been on national security, getting General Madison as Secretary of Defense, working with Pompeo, doing those issues that are national security. A long time ago, honestly, I've stopped reacting to everything that the president has stated and try to work on the issues.
For the President of the United States to undermine the very institution of free and fair elections, of democracy itself, this is extremely disturbing. And for what? To try to make his victory look a little bigger than it really was? Because he's embarrassed to have lost the popular vote? More than a year later, we have the benefit of knowing for sure. President Trump never did provide a shred of evidence for his wild claims that millions of illegal votes were cast. His administration actually set up an official committee to find evidence of voter fraud, which was widely dismissed as a sham, and it was quietly disbanded by President Trump, having found no evidence to prove his false conspiratorial claims. Yet the damage has been done. According to a Politico poll, 1 in 4 Americans believes Trump's claims that there was massive voter fraud. We've looked at some major, pretty disturbing examples. Let's look at a minor one, so small, barely anyone even noticed. On February 12, 2017, President Trump tweeted the following. Trump appears to be implying that CNN cut Sanders' mic because Sanders called them fake news, that CNN was trying to censor Bernie. Here's the actual exchange between CNN's Aaron Burnett and Senator Bernie Sanders.
So far he hasn't said much, Senator. I don't know if you've heard. Here's what he has said. He was asked about this report about Flynn on his flight to Mar-a-Lago late today, right? He just landed about an hour or so ago, and here's how he responded.
I don't know about it. I haven't seen it. What report is that? I haven't seen it.
Reporting that he talked to the ambassador to Russia before you were inaugurated about sanctions, maybe trying to...
I haven't seen that. I'll look at that.
He says he knows nothing about it, hasn't seen any of these reports. Is that a problem?
Well, I don't know. Maybe he was watching CNN fake news. What do you think?
You don't buy it.
That was a joke.
I know it was a joke. I'm saying you don't buy what he said, obviously. We are back. Senator Sanders is back with me, and I want to apologize to our viewers, obviously, for that technical issue. And Senator, you had just been joking about, CNN fake news, but obviously the reports about General Flynn...
Well, here is the point. Here is the point, Darren, that it's not a joke. And I can tell you that here in Vermont and all over this country, there is a real concern about what's happening in this country over the last month. When you have a president who attacks people in the media who make critical remarks of him, which is what their job is, as providing fake news. When you have a president who attacks a judge who rules against him as a so-called judge, indicting the entire judiciary, clearly we have a president who does not understand what our Constitution is about, what democracy is about, and I think there is a fear in this country of this nation under Trump moving into a more authoritarian mode. Second of all, what I hear in Vermont and around this country is people see this president as a total hypocrite.
Does it sound to you like Sanders is being censored? Of course not. He and the host share a laugh about the dropped audio, using the context of Trump's constant attacks on CNN, which he likes to call fake news, as the punchline. Sanders goes on to actually defend news organizations' role in keeping the president accountable. Audio feeds cut out all the time during live cable news, and the interview picked up right after the break. This example shows just how casually Trump spreads conspiracy theories or speaks in conspiratorial tones. He was, it appears, just sitting around watching cable news, and he tweeted out a conspiracy theory to his millions of followers. To his followers, who are probably not watching CNN since they're fake news, according to Trump, probably many took this to be true. This would have been a major news story for a normal president, but Trump attacks people on Twitter so often and tweets made-up conspiracy theories so frequently that many of them, like this incident, don't even merit news coverage. Did you hear about this? You probably didn't. Ultimately, Trump's willingness to embrace conspiracy theories lies at the heart of his candidacy and rise in American politics. In 2011, Trump attended CPAC, a high-profile conservative conference where he announced he was considering a run for president. Trump was known by many Americans as a reality TV host, but not as a politician. He found an opportunity in birtherism, a fringe online conspiracy theory movement that promoted the baseless claim that President Obama was not born in the United States and thus ineligible to be president. Hard-right conservatives were shell-shocked by Obama's massive victory in 2008, which took away their control of Congress, and some people were clearly upset that a black man had been elected president for the first time. The rumor that Obama was not born in the U.S. spread online in white nationalist forums, websites devoted to conspiracy theories, and extremist right-wing blogs, a movement that mainstream U.S. politicians and news organizations had rejected, labeling it the birther movement, a racist conspiracy theory sought to delegitimize the first black president. Facing these malicious rumors about his birth, Obama actually released a copy of his birth certificate to dispel any rumors in 2008. Unlike mainstream U.S. politicians, Trump saw birtherism as an opportunity instead of a racist fringe conspiracy theory. On March 23, 2011, he went on the TV show The View to discuss rumors about him running for president, and here is where he first publicly proclaimed his birther views.
I want him to show his birth certificate. There's something on that birth certificate that he doesn't like.
I'm starting to wonder myself whether or not he was born in this country.
And if he wasn't born in this country, which is a real possibility, then he has pulled one of the great cons in the history of politics.
He could have been born in Kenya and gone over to the United States, and everybody wants to be a U.S. citizen.
Do you accept that what he produced is valid?
No, I don't necessarily
But do you
accept
believe he probably was born in America?
No. I say he might have been.
If the state of Hawaii says this is official, he was born in Hawaii on this date, here it is, why do you deny that?
A lot of people do not think it was an authentic certificate.
How can you say that if this...
You won't report it, Wolf. His mother was not in the hospital. There were many other things that came out.
Donald, you're beginning to sound a little ridiculous. I have to tell you.
You are, Wolf.
Who knows? Who knows? Who cares right now? We're talking about something else, okay? I mean, I have my own theory on Obama. Someday I'll write a book. I'll do another book. It'll do very successfully.
Donald Trump believes now that he was born in the United States.
He believes President Obama was born here.
President Barack Obama was born in the United States.
Became the most high-profile person to publicly support the birther movement, making multiple appearances on news programs where he spread the claim over and over again without any evidence, while facing the scorn of journalists who sometimes called him out for his bigotry. The more Trump promoted birtherism, the better he performed in early polls of the 2012 Republican field. It's worth asking the question, why was Trump spending so much time talking about birtherism? Let's pretend for a second that there was evidence that Obama was not a natural-born citizen. The people who would look into that claim would be government officials, journalists, possibly the FBI. Trump was a celebrity TV host and a casino owner with zero government experience or expertise. So why did he take up the birther cause? Well, the birther movement provided a vehicle for Trump to gain access to attention from political media and help him lay the groundwork for a wider base of political support, and ultimately make a run for the presidency. Trump's embrace of conspiracy theories is way outside the bounds of norms of what is expected of a US president. Yet, many of his false claims are not actually conspiracy theories. Trump doesn't talk a lot about policy details. Most of his big ideas are vague platitudes and symbolic statements that he'll make America great again,
Make America great again.
put America first,
America first.
drain the swamp,
It is time to drain the swamp.
build a wall,
We're going to build a wall.
etc. But Trump sometimes does wade into policy details. Let's take a look at Trump's victory speech after winning the New Hampshire Republican primary.
Don't believe those phony numbers when you hear 4.9 and 5% unemployment. The number's probably 28, 29, as high as 35. In fact, I even heard recently 42%. Do you think we'd have gatherings like this if we had 5% unemployment? Do you really think we'd have these gatherings?
40% unemployment? The US unemployment rate is roughly 4.5%, down from a peak of about 10% at the height of the global financial crisis in 2009. What's even stranger is that New Hampshire has one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country, at just around 3%. The unemployment rate is calculated by the United States Department of Labor. It's an official government statistic. I'm from New Hampshire, and I can confirm that New Hampshire is not in the middle of some statewide Great Depression. It's actually the richest state in the US per capita, with the median household income about $67,000, according to the Washington Post. As is typical, Trump did not provide any evidence for his absurdly false claims of massive unemployment in New Hampshire or in the rest of the country. Trump actually sounds like someone whose source of information is just random people on Twitter, spouting off dramatic increasing numbers. Of all of Trump's false claims and misinformation, the one that is most central to his ideology and worldview is his claim that the violent crime rate in the US is at a record high.
And yet the murder rate in our country is the highest it's been in 47 years, right? Did you know that? 47 years. I used to use that. I'd say that in a speech and everybody was surprised because the press doesn't tell it like it is. It wasn't to their advantage to say that. But the murder rate is the highest it's been in, I guess, from 45 to 47 years.
All right, let's begin here with Brian Stelter, our CNN media correspondent. You know, Brian, I remember him saying this on the trail is candidate Trump. You know, it's wrong. Where is he getting these numbers?
That's right. It was fact-checked and debunked during the campaign. Now he's saying it again to these law enforcement officials invited to the White House today. He's saying the press isn't telling it like it is, while in fact Trump's not telling it like it is.
Throughout his campaign and continuing as president, Trump has claimed that we're in the midst of a massive violent crime wave in the United States. Again, here we see Trump alleging a kind of conspiracy that the press doesn't tell it like it is, that it was to their advantage to not tell the truth about violent crime. What does that even mean? Why would it be advantageous for the press to lie to the American public about the violent crime rate? As we media scholars know, news media actually heavily covers violence since it helps the ratings. As the old saying goes, if it bleeds, it leads. The only people who clearly benefit about lying about the violent crime rate are politicians who want to scare people in order to win their votes. Beyond his specific false claim that violent crime is at a record high, Trump speaks constantly about America in terms of violence, chaos, and terror, kind of like a Hollywood movie.
I have a message for all of you. The crime and violence that today afflicts our nation will soon, and I mean very soon, come to an end. Beginning on January 20th of 2017, safety will be restored. And the crime, and the gangs, and the drugs, this American carnage stops right here and stops right now.
Trump finished his inaugural speech promising to make America safe again, signaling that this was key to his entire policy agenda.
We will make America safe again.
Let's be clear, violent crime is not at a record high, not even close. Violent crime in the US has declined dramatically, nearly by half over the past 2 decades, from its peak in the early 1990s. Don't believe me? You can go directly to the FBI's website, which collects crime data from police officials from across the country, and look at their stats on violent crime and see for yourself. The FBI statistics are the authoritative source used to measure violent crime in America, and it's the same data that journalists use to fact-check Trump's claims.
I know that corruption has reached a level like never ever before in our country. Poverty and violence at home, war and destruction abroad. 180,000 illegal immigrants with criminal records ordered deported from our country are tonight roaming free to threaten peaceful citizens.
It is worth noting that since President Obama took office, crime rates, the flow of illegal immigrants over our borders, and claims for unemployment benefits have all declined. And yet, frighteningly, when reporters started pointing that out, it didn't seem to matter. Just watch as Newt Gingrich brushed off any effort to fact-check Trump's claims about the US crime rate.
Violent crime is down. The economy is ticking up.
It is not down in the biggest cities.
Violent crime murder rate is down.
Then how come it's up in Chicago, up in Baltimore, and up in Washington?
There are pockets where certainly we have not tackled
your national
murder
capital, your third biggest city.
But violent crime across the country is down.
The average American, I will bet you this morning, does not think crime is down, does not think they are safer.
But it is. We are safer, and it is down.
No, that's your view. I just told no.
These are the national FBI facts.
But what I said is also what I said is also a fact.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's only a fact that that's a feeling people have. And sure, you can cherry pick recent upticks in some cities, but the overall trend across the country during the Obama presidency, and indeed for the last 25 years, is down. But Newt wasn't done.
The current view is that liberals have a whole set of statistics which theoretically may be right, but it's not where human beings are.
But what you're saying is, but hold on, Mr. Speaker, because you're saying liberals use these numbers, they use this sort of magic math. This is the FBI statistics. They're not a liberal organization.
No,
they're a crime
what I said is equally true. People feel more threatened.
Yes, they feel it, but the facts don't support it.
As a political candidate, I'll go with how people feel, and I'll let you go with the theoreticians.
And it is worth taking just a moment to seriously consider what Gingrich was saying there, because think about it. I think we can all agree that candidates can create feelings in people. And what Gingrich is saying is that feelings are as valid as facts. So then, by the transitive property, candidates can create facts. Because that means someone like Donald Trump can essentially create his own reality, and that is the closest thing to an actual magic spell I think I've ever seen.
It's never just about violent crime, however. Trump routinely claims that immigration is causing more violent crime, especially immigrants here illegally. Remember, he began his presidential campaign announcement speech by saying that Mexicans were rapists and bringing violent crime, and that some of them might be good people.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. And some, I assume, are good people.
Trump constantly cites immigrants here illegally as a source of crime. Just listen to part of his RNC speech.
Nearly 180,000 illegal immigrants with criminal records ordered deported from our country are tonight roaming free to threaten peaceful citizens.
Wow, that does sound terrifying. Terrifyingly inaccurate. There is no evidence to support Trump's claim that immigrants cause more violent crime than the rest of the population. In fact, evidence shows the opposite is true. Immigrants are strongly associated with a drop in violent crime. New immigrants who don't have a lot of financial resources often flock to cities or towns that are depressed, where a loss of industry or work has left vacant homes and storefronts and increasing crime. And in the process, they help lead to a revitalization of abandoned downtowns and urban centers. American history has been driven by waves of immigrants who came in and fueled major economic boom times. Trump's claim has been thoroughly debunked by many news organizations, including the conservative Fox News. This is one of the many reasons that Trump has frequently been accused of racism or even spreading racist propaganda, as he routinely seeks to portray immigrants, Hispanics, Black Americans, and other non-white groups as inherently more violent or dangerous. As someone who reads and watches the news for a living, and having seen hundreds of Trump's speeches and interviews, I think one of the most important lessons that I've come to understand about Trump is that he seems to care about information in terms of use value rather than truth value. That is, when Trump sees a statement or a piece of information on Twitter, or something gets repeated by a guest on Fox and Friends or wherever, he seems to care about that information in terms of can it be used to make him look good or be used as a weapon to attack others. This is not unique to Trump, but he takes this to a kind of extreme. So where does Trump get his information from? This is a speculative and pretty difficult question to answer. In his HBO show, political commentator and satirist John Oliver has done some of the best work looking at Trump's potential sources of information and trying to understand how he ends up making such wild claims. Professional journalists usually avoid that kind of speculation and are hesitant to make a claim about Trump's media consumption habits based on partial or anecdotal evidence.
Back in March, he claimed that a man who had rushed the stage at one of his rallies had ties to ISIS, something that had circulated online and had been found to be untrue. And when that was pointed out to him, this was his response.
There's no ties to ISIS for this man, no law enforcement official, and that this video that you linked to appears to be a hoax.
What do I know about it? All I know is what's on the internet.
Okay. Here's the thing. Being on the internet is not a high bar for accuracy.
There's no one source for Trump's misinformation, false claims, or conspiracy theories. Some he finds from random people on Twitter, others come from his embrace of sensationalist, partisan sources like Fox News, or the more extremist Breitbart News. Other times, he makes false claims due in part to an inability to understand basic political policy, or that he hasn't read policy briefs prepared by his advisors.
During the campaign, Trump routinely used his platform to share wildly incorrect information, and even fellow conservatives tried to point out how irresponsible this was.
You tweeted out that whites killed by blacks, these were statistics you picked up from somewhere, at a rate of 81%. And that's totally wrong. Whites killed by blacks is 15%.
Hey, Bill, am I going to check every statistic? I get millions and millions of people.
You got it. You're a presidential contender. You got to check it.
I have millions of people. You know what? Fine.
Did you catch that? When Trump says, I get millions and millions of people at Donald Trump, by the way,
I get millions and millions of people
You got
at
it.
real
You're
Donald
a
Trump, by the
presidential
way.
What he's basically saying is he will retweet statistics from anybody who tweets at him, admitting that he gets his information from random people on Twitter, not even people he follows, literally anybody. Normally, presidents get their information from government sources, professional news outlets, intelligence briefings, and other verified experts, not from tweet mentions. They also typically check to make sure any information they share with the public is valid, since the president is supposed to be the highest form of authority in the country. Let's look closer at this image that he retweeted. Just looking at it, any reasonable person would instantly recognize that this doesn't look like an infographic from a legitimate news source. It looks like an amateur-made image with bogus information from a racist person on Twitter, which, it turns out, is exactly what it is. Conservative blogger Charles Johnson looked into the origin of this Twitter meme and, unsurprisingly, found that it originated with a British neo-Nazi whose Twitter bio states, "We should have listened to that Austrian chap with a little mustache." That would be Adolf Hitler. We know that President Trump watches a lot of cable news, especially Fox News. It's well known at this point that many of Trump's morning tweets are written in reaction to topics that come up on a show called Fox and Friends. But he also seems to get some of his information from random people on the internet, without knowing or caring about the origin of that information. One of the biggest differences between President Trump and previous American presidents are his non-stop attacks on journalists and news organizations.
Media is biased. It's rigged and it's biased and it's wrong.
From his podium, Trump has been fueling resentment for journalists.
They're just bad people, the media. They are bad people. They're among the most dishonest people I've ever met in my life. Total phonies. They're bad people. They're bad people.
This is one of the crowd's favourite moments at a Trump rally. It's almost like pantomime. Trump is the hero and we're the villains.
And his message is resonating.
You don't know what I report.
I've sent my email to everybody.
Everyone hates the media.
It's a sadly familiar cycle. Trump makes a false claim, insults someone on Twitter, or spreads a conspiracy theory, and journalists are forced to fact-check his statements, which often make him look like a liar, or someone who doesn't know what he's talking about, which then causes Trump to attack news organizations. There's perhaps no news organization that receives a near daily stream of attacks and insults as CNN. During the campaign, Trump often led his rallies with chants of, "CNN sucks," a spectacle unlike anything we've seen in modern US politics.
They are so dishonest.
Politicians attacking the media during huge rallies is common among authoritarian countries, but it's not something we've really seen in the United States. Just 1 month into his presidency, Trump called CNN, the New York Times, NBC News, and many more media organizations the enemy of the American people. His comments directly threaten the tradition of freedom of the press in the US. Sure, all presidents have complained about unfair media coverage, but never has an American president described the press as the enemy or dismissed all negative press coverage of his administration as fake news. According to CNN, in his first year in office, Trump used the word fake over 400 times on Twitter and in public statements. This all begs the question, if the US news media are all fake news and the enemy, where exactly should Americans get their information from? Directly from the president? That's pretty much the dream of all dictators and authoritarian leaders, and why the freedom of the press is so important. Not surprisingly, Democrats routinely call out the president for his attacks on the press, but so too have some prominent Republicans, especially those who are veteran politicians or otherwise not dependent on Trump to help them win re-election. John McCain, the former Republican nominee for president and American war hero, has repeatedly called on President Trump to stop attacking the news media.
Before I let you go, I'm curious of your reaction to a tweet that the president sent Friday night. The fake news media, failing New York Times, NBC News, ABC, CBS, CNN, is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people. You believe the press is the enemy? Do you believe any group of Americans are the enemy of another group of Americans?
I was talking about the period, as you know, of the New World Order. A fundamental part of that New World Order was a free press. I hate the press. I hate you especially. But the fact is, we need you. We need a free press. We must have it. It's vital. If you want to preserve, I'm very serious now, if you want to preserve democracy as we know it, you have to have a free and many times adversarial press. And without it, I'm afraid that we would lose so much of our individual liberties over time. That's how dictators get started.
Republican Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona took to the floor of the Senate to condemn Trump's attack on the media, comparing his words to the Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin.
The enemy of the people was how the President of the United States called the free press in 2017. Mr. President, it is a testament to the condition of our democracy that our own president uses words infamously spoken by Joseph Stalin to describe his enemies. It bears noting that so fraught with malice was the phrase enemy of the people that even Nikita Khrushchev forbade its use, telling the Soviet Communist Party that the phrase had been introduced by Stalin for the purpose of, quote, annihilating such individuals, unquote, who disagreed with the supreme leader. This alone should be the source of great shame for us in this body, especially for those of us in the President's party, for they are shameful, repulsive statements. And of course, the President has it precisely backward. Despotism is the enemy of the people. The free press is the despot's enemy, which makes the free press the guardian of democracy. When a figure in power reflexively calls any press that doesn't suit him fake news, it is that person who should be the figure of suspicion, not the press.
The danger here isn't just about false claims or threatening press freedom. President Trump is actively under investigation by the FBI for alleged collusion with a foreign enemy and committing obstruction of justice in his firing of Jim Comey. As of this recording, his campaign manager, top foreign policy advisor, and other campaign aides have already been arrested and indicted by the FBI. And there's a real possibility that Trump could face impeachment. With his aggressive attacks on the press, political experts believe that Trump is trying to delegitimize the press so that, in the face of increasing investigations and possible indictment, his supporters will rally to Trump rather than the law. Under constant attack by President Trump and wary of being seen as unfair, journalists struggle with how to accurately report the steady stream of false claims, misinformation, and outright lies from the Trump administration. Journalistic convention holds that reporters avoid using the term lie and liar, which suggests knowing intent, in favor of more neutral terms like incorrect, misleading, false claim, baseless assertion, and so on and so on. But should journalists call out a lie even when it's obvious the administration is in fact lying? NPR has decided not to.
Mike Oreskes, how much discussion has there been about this word lie?
There's been quite a bit, and of course it began during the campaign, and we at NPR have decided not to use the word lie in most situations. And there's really two reasons. One of them is the one that Mary Louise cited, but to me there's a second reason, and maybe more important. Our job as journalists is to report, to find facts, establish their authenticity, and share them with everybody. And I think that when you use words like lie, it gets in the way of that.
Similarly, the New York Times has avoided using the term lie or liar in most of their reporting on the Trump administration. But unlike NPR, they have used the term when they felt they know the president was lying with obvious intent.
So, when Donald Trump says something that is not true, how do you decide if you want to call it a lie or just say it's not true or use a word like baseless? For example, he tweeted, in addition to winning the Electoral College in a landslide, I won the popular vote if you deduct the millions of people who voted illegally. The New York Times headline was, Trump promotes a baseless claim on illegal voting, no proof of millions. Right. So what was the conversation like about what word to use there? Baseless, fraudulent, lie, untrue?
That was a great headline.
I authorized and pushed us to use lie for the first time in relation to Donald Trump when he finally acknowledged that he thought Barack Obama was born in the United States. I thought there was no other word.
Can I read that
would carry
headline? The headline
Sure.
was Donald Trump clung to birther lie for years and still isn't apologetic. Is that the headline you're
Right.
thinking of?
That's the headline I'm thinking about. And the story throughout uses the word lie. A lie implies that it was done with complete, total knowledge that it was a falsehood and that the person pushed it despite all evidence against. And I think what Donald Trump pushed about President Barack Obama not having been born in the United States was a lie. And I think there's no question he knew it was a lie.
This seems like a good approach on some level, with obvious lies. Not labeling as such does a kind of disservice to the public, who need to know when the president or any politician is determined to mislead them. CNN's media reporter Brian Stelter took on this point directly.
Welcome back. Let's tell some truths about lying. Because the way Donald Trump lies has people rethinking some of the basic premises of journalism, like the assumption that everything a president says is automatically news. When President-elect Trump lies so casually, so cynically, the news isn't so much the false thing he said, it's that he felt like he could just go ahead and say it, go ahead and lie to you. That's the story. Why does he bend and flex and twist and warp and distort the truth? Personally, I'm curious because I think Trump does it differently than past presidents. His lies are different and deserve scrutiny. I mean, look, for as long as people have been talking, people have been lying, right? Look at these presidential one-liners. They are infamous.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed.
If you like your doctor, you keep your doctor. If you like your current insurance, you keep that insurance. Period.
All of those cases are a little bit different, but normally when presidents fib, it's hard to prove the fib at the time. And later, when the truth does come out, as it always does, presidents pay a price. Will President Trump pay a price for lying too? Or is something broken? Will voters just shrug it off? Let me show you an example. Something small but revealing from Trump's rally on Thursday.
We won in a landslide. That was a landslide. And we didn't have the press. The press was brutal.
Landslide is obviously untrue. It's not possible to lose the popular vote by 2.5 million and win in a landslide. This was rightly fact-checked all over the place, just like many of Trump's campaign exaggerations. Of the statements checked by PolitiFact during the campaign, 70% were rated mostly false, or pants on fire. This is how Trump deceives people differently than past presidents have. Court cases involving Trump have shown that he lies even when the truth is really easy to discern. And that's what we're seeing all again now. That's why I think fact-checking is important, but the framing of these stories is even more important. Take Trump's promotion of this voter fraud conspiracy idea. He said on Twitter, "I won the popular vote if you deduct the millions of people who voted illegally." The journalistic impulse was to say something like, Trump claims he won the popular vote. I would suggest to you the better framing is, Trump lies again, embracing a far right-wing conspiracy theory. See, focusing on the falsehood creates more confusion and gives the lie even more life, and that's the wrong way to go. Focusing on Trump's tendency to buy into BS gets to what's really going on here. This calls for more reporting, and for reporters to show our work, to show that we actually know the truth.
Journalists, to their credit, try to warn the public about Trump. Newspapers often endorse a candidate for president, which typically falls in line with the paper's political orientation, which typically matches the politics of the region that they serve. Mother Jones compiled a list of the top 100 newspapers from across the country, which covers the most prestigious and professional journalists, comparing their endorsements from 2012 to the 2016 presidential election. What does this comparison tell us? That working journalists aren't secretly all Democrats, and that many were happy to endorse Republican Mitt Romney in 2012. But in 2016, only a single newspaper in this group endorsed Donald Trump, and that newspaper, the Las Vegas Review-Journal, is owned by one of Trump's best buddies, billionaire casino owner Sheldon Adelson. Never in American history has a Republican nominee for president received virtually no endorsements from newspapers, even from conservative papers. In fact, Politico found that out of hundreds of newspapers from across the country, Trump received only 6 total endorsements. I was personally shocked to see that the New Hampshire Union Leader, one of the most prominent conservative-leaning newspapers in the country that I grew up reading, decided to endorse third-party candidate Gary Johnson over Trump, even though they have endorsed the Republican candidate every election for over 100 years. In their editorial, editor Joseph McQuaid said of Trump, "The man is a liar, a bully, a buffoon. He denigrates any individual or group that displeases him. He has dishonored military veterans and their families, made fun of the physically frail, and changed political views almost as often as he's changed wives." Most shocking was USA Today's Anybody But Trump unendorsement. USA Today is the most popular daily newspaper in America, and as Middle America's newspaper, they have never made an endorsement in their 33 years of publication, as part of their policy of avoiding overt political partisanship. Yet in 2016, they decided to warn their readers to support anybody but Trump, writing, "This year, the choice isn't between 2 capable major party nominees who happen to have significant ideological differences. This year, one of the candidates, Republican nominee Donald Trump, is, by unanimous consensus of the editorial board, unfit for the presidency. Trump has demonstrated repeatedly that he lacks the temperament, knowledge, steadiness, and honesty that Americans need from its presidents." Imagine you're a Trump supporter, and every single day the press is fact-checking and correcting the president's statements, pointing out the lack of evidence, at times expressing shock at his failure to understand that he's even spreading false information or conspiracy theories. I think many journalists have tried their best to be fair to Donald Trump, but journalists are people too, and they sometimes get frustrated or even upset at how frequent Trump and his spokespersons lie to the public. Their job is to report the words of the president to the American people, so when his administration lies, journalists are in danger of being complicit in that lie if they do not call out false information. Journalists are supposed to fact-check and provide context to statements, and they have to do it so much with Trump that, in a weird way, it does kind of feel unfair. It feels like the media is biased or unfair to Trump because they're forced to so frequently point out when the president is wrong, spreading a conspiracy theory, or simply lying.
This sign pretty much sums up the sentiment. Donald Trump is a warrior, bravely withstanding the mainstream media's efforts to bring him down. Arguably, it's a smart tactic. Everything unflattering becomes a lie.
Are you guys part of the crooked media?
What's the crooked media?
Well, the crooked media is a liberal media that portrays Trump as, a bad person and makes Hillary look like she's an angel.
Hasn't the media in general been reporting only about Hillary Clinton's emails lately? Surely it's been pretty balanced.
But it's a lot of stuff they're keeping out from the general public.
After watching this cycle over and over again, it wouldn't be hard to imagine a Trump supporter thinking that, hey, maybe Trump is right. Look at how the media attacks and bashes him. The press really does treat Trump differently than previous presidents, and Trump supporters are absolutely right in this observation. However, what many of them don't seem to understand is that this difference in treatment is because the press is doing their job. Trump's lies and frequent attacks on the press have clearly damaged his presidency. In his first year, he's had the worst polling of any president on record. He's been stuck between 35 and 40% approval rating since nearly his first week, and his disapproval rating has hovered well above 50%. Still, millions of Americans believe Trump's claims and have come to distrust the news media, and for them, Trump seems like the only person willing to tell them the truth. The political divide in the US has been getting worse, and Trump's attacks on the media and on truth itself is helping to create literal separate realities with little common ground.